when Clint Eastwood sat in her section. She had no idea her world was about to flip upside down. Mia adjusted her apron, glanced at the clock over the diner's counter. It was nearly 7 p.m., the time when the supper rush normally eased off, departing a slower pace to wind down her shift. For most, the modest eatery situated off the highway was merely a pit stop, a location to get a bite before continuing their journey. For Mia, it was her lifeline. Age 28, she balanced long hours here with parenting her 6-year-old son Jordan. Each tip and every paycheck went toward preserving their modest apartment and paying for Jordan's growth. List of school supplies. She strolled effortlessly from table to table, her friendly grin a barrier against the tiredness tugging at her. The regulars knew her tale, or pieces of it. A few would slip an additional $1 or $2 when they could. Although Mia never begged for compassion, she had learned early on that the world wasn't fair, and her only choice was to keep marching forward. The bell over the door chimed, grabbing Mia's attention. She gazed up, anticipating another journey-weary traveler. Instead, a man stepped in, with a peaceful confidence. It made the air in the room feel heavier. He wore a modest button-up shirt and pants, his aged face half concealed by a hat pulled low. It took her a bit, but when he glanced her way, she knew exactly who he was. Clint Eastwood, the Clint Eastwood. Her breath hitched. She wasn't one to fawn over celebs. She didn't have the time or energy for it. Yet this was different. Clint Eastwood was an icon, someone her late father used to talk about when they watched old westerns with. For a brief second, recollections of such occasions flashed in her head, yet she didn't have time to dwell. Clint slid into a corner booth, and Mia knew it was her turn to serve him. Yet this wasn't just another consumer, and something about his peaceful presence felt her heart accelerate. Mia grabbed her notes and pen, took a big breath, and approached the booth. When she came closer, she observed the delicate intricacies. His hand slightly worn but steady, sitting on the table, the penetrating eyes behind the brim of his hat. It appeared to observe everything without giving anything out. He looked up as she halted near him, his face calm, virtually unreadable. "Nice evening," she started, her voice steadier than she imagined. "What can I get started for you?" He glanced at the menu briefly before tossing it away. "Simply a coffee and a burger. Medium rare, no onions." Straightforward enough. Mia jotted it down, yet she couldn't ignore the small trembling in her hand when she turned to go. Clint's words halted her busy night. She turned back to him astonished. Most clients didn't bother with small conversation, unless they were regulars. "Not that awful," she answered, smiling slightly. "Keeps me on my toes." He nodded, his face softening just a little. "You've got a nice pace. Not simple to keep up in a location like this." She blinked, uncertain how to answer. Was he complimenting her? Clint Eastwood, a man she'd only ever seen in movies, was seeing her work ethic. She managed a pleasant grin before retreating to the counter to put in his order, although her mind raced with questions. Why was he here in this little cafe off the highway? He could afford the fanciest restaurants in California, but here he was drinking water from a chipped glass, waiting for a burger like every other traveler. When the order was ready, Mia delivered the plate and coffee to his table. She laid them down carefully, getting a quick, admiring glimpse from him. "Thank you," he stated simply. "You're welcome," she answered, attempting to sound casual. Yet she couldn't help feeling that this moment, this everyday connection, was somewhat different. As she walked to service other tables, she realized he wasn't in any haste to eat. He sat there nearly thoughtful, intermittently drinking his coffee. Yet why did it seem like he wasn't simply here to eat? Something about his presence lingered in the back of her mind, and she couldn't shake the sense that this night was far from average. Mia kept herself busy refilling coffee cups, cleaning tables, and accepting fresh orders. Yet she couldn't resist staring at Clint's booth. Every so often he ate slowly, almost systematically, as if he had all the time in the world. Occasionally, their eyes met, and he'd offer her a courteous nod, a quiet acknowledgement that made her stomach tingle. After completing his lunch, Clint nodded to her with a modest raising of his hand. Mia wiped her hands on her apron and stepped over, effort to keep her expression calm. "Everything fine?" she asked, her voice steady. Excellent, he added with a slight smile. That was one of the finest burgers I've had in a long time. She chuckled lightly, the compliment catching her off guard. So I'll let the cook know. He'll love hearing that. For a time, Clint didn't say anything. He merely gazed at her, and in that brief quiet, it felt like he was scrutinizing her, not in a judgmental way, yet with a kind of curiosity that made her feel vulnerable, yet curiously seen. You've got a terrific energy about you, he said finally. You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago. Mia blinked, unsure how to answer. Was this a compliment or remembrance? She couldn't tell well. Thank you, she managed, her cheeks warming. I just try to go through the day like everyone else. He nodded, his eyes glinting with something she couldn't quite place. That's the trick, isn't it? Just getting through. Before she could answer, he dug into his wallet and pulled out a couple dollars. He placed them on the table, coupled with a folded sheet of paper. Retain the change, he said, standing up, and read this when you have a minute. Mia gazed at the message, her heart racing. Thank you, she said quietly, unclear whether he even heard her. As he headed toward the door, the bell above it jingled as he departed, and just like that he was gone. After a few seconds, she stood motionless by the booth, looking at the note as if it could burn her fingertips. What could he have possibly written? And why did he appear so bent on her reading it? But the inquiries would have to wait. There were still tables to serve, because Mia wasn't the sort to leave her tasks undone, even if her thoughts was racing with eagerness. By the time Mia emptied Clint's booth, the diner had quieted down. The last of the evening's customers were sipping their coffee or conversing gently, while the background buzz of the jukebox filled the space. She took up the folded note with trembling fingers, placing it inside her apron pocket. After she finished clearing the table, she wasn't sure why she felt so anxious. That was only a message, right? After her shift was finished, Mia slipped into the back room to grab her stuff. Her curiosity eventually got the best of her as she brought out the paper, delicately unfolding it. Her eyes examined the first few lines, and her breath hitched. Lovely Mia, I don't know much about you. Yet in the short time I've been here, I've seen something uncommon, real resilience. Observing how you manage this house with grace, even under pressure, is a reminder of how much strength exists in the daily heroes of this world. You remind me of someone extremely important to me, someone who showed me the value of hard work and compassion. I don't know your story, but I can see in your eyes that you've borne more than your share of burdens. That's why I want to accomplish anything. No strings attached. Mia's hands began to tremble as she kept reading. I'm leaving a tiny gesture for you to utilize. Manner you see fit, whether it's for your child, your future, or simply a moment of rest. I hope it provides you some serenity. Individuals like you deserve to be seen. And I see you. Wrapped within the message was a check. Mia's heart nearly stopped when she saw the quantity. $10,000. Her knees buckled, and she sat down hard on the bench in the back room, tears flowing down her cheeks. It wasn't simply the money, though. That was life-changing in itself. It was the words, the acknowledgement, the feeling that someone as accomplished and renowned as Clint Eastwood had taken the time to observe her, to care for someone who frequently felt invisible in the world. It was overwhelming. Yet even as she struggled to understand it all, one question remained: why she? And what was she going to do with this unexpected gift? Mia sat in the back room for what felt like hours, her thoughts spinning with feelings. The check in her hand seemed unreal, like something out of a dream. She thought about the bills heaped on her kitchen counter, the second-hand shoes her son, Jordan, had been wearing for months, with the leaking faucet in their modest flat, something she couldn't afford to mend. This money might affect so much, but beyond the financial relief, Clint's remarks stayed in her head. You remind me of someone extremely important to me. Who was that person, and what had created Clint Eastwood? Of all people, see something in her. It wasn't only the money or the note. It was the way he had stared at her, with a form of respect and recognition, emotion she hadn't felt in years. Mia dried her eyes and took a big breath. She realized she couldn't keep this to herself. So she contacted her best pal Tasha, who had been her support through innumerable difficulties. Few minutes, Tasha was at the diner, seated opposite from Mia, in one of the unoccupied booths. "Wait, wait, wait," Tasha said, held up her hands as Mia gave her the message. "You're telling me Clint Eastwood left you this?" Mia nodded, her eyes still swollen from sobbing. "I don't even know why I didn't do something exceptional." Tasha read the note silently, her eyes expanding with each syllable. As she came to the check, she sent out a low whistle. "Girl, this is insane. Do you know what this may imply for you and Jordan?" "I know," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it doesn't feel real. Why would someone like him care about someone like me?" Tasha leaned across the table and grasped Mia's hands. "When he saw you, Mia, he saw what I've seen all along. You work harder than everyone I know, and you never let life shatter you. People recognize that type of strength." Mia gazed down at the check, her heart filled with thankfulness, but also with uncertainty. What if I don't deserve it? What if this is some type of error? "It's not a mistake," Tasha stated firmly. "You do deserve it. The question is, what are you going to do with it?" But that was the question, wasn't it? And as much as Mia wanted to rejoice, she couldn't ignore the weight of this unexpected gift, or the responsibilities that came with it. That night Mia sat at her kitchen table, long after Jordan had gone to bed, the note and check spread out in front of her. The little flat was silent, but for the odd squeak of the rusty pipes, and the little light above the table flickered softly. Her mind went in 1,000 ways. This money might pay their overdue rent, replace the faulty automobile she depended on, and offer Jordan opportunities she could only dream about until now. But as fascinating as the possibilities seemed, they also terrified her. She took up the note again, reading Clint's remarks for the 10th time. "I hope it provides you some serenity. Individuals like you deserve to be seen. And I see you." Those comments touched a chord deeper than she'd imagined. How many years had she wasted trying to keep afloat, working double shifts, skipping meals so Jordan may have enough? She'd pushed herself to the verge of fatigue. So many times she'd lost count. And through it all she'd felt invisible, like the world didn't care whether she made it or not. Although Clint Eastwood had seen her, he'd watched her battle, her determination, her resilience. And in that moment, she knew this wasn't just about the money. It was about believing. Felt she was worthy of something greater. Mia thought of her father. She had always been her biggest supporter. Before he departed, he used to say, "Don't let the world wear you down, child. You've got a fire in you." For the first time in years, she felt that fire flare again. She picked out a paper and began sketching ideas. Things she could do with the money that would generate permanent change. Maybe she could finally take a lesson in accounting, a career she'd always dreamt of, but had never had the time or finances to pursue. Maybe she could build up a tiny education fund for Jordan, offering him a shot for a better future. Yet one notion kept returning louder than the rest: paying it forward. Clint's gesture had transformed her life, and she couldn't ignore the prospect of doing the same for someone else. Nevertheless, the doubt persisted. The path ahead felt enormous, but for the first time in a long time, Mia allowed herself to hope. Morning sunshine flowed through the window, while Mia stood in the kitchen, drinking a cup of coffee and watching Jordan play with his action figures. On the worn old carpet, the check and note still sat on the table, now folded nicely. After a long night of pondering, she had made her decision. She contacted Tasha first, who instantly offered to monitor Jordan for the afternoon. Mia indicated that she wanted some time to figure things out, and Tasha didn't ask any questions. She simply stated, "You do what you need to do, girl. I've got you." With Jordan comfortably established at Tasha's residence, Mia went to the bank. The check felt heavy in her handbag, its appearance almost too bizarre to believe. The bank teller, a young woman with a sparkling smile, raised an eyebrow when she noticed the quantity. "That's quite a deposit," the teller replied, her tone courteous but inquiring. Mia nodded, flashing a little grin. "It's a gift." The teller didn't press further, and Mia felt a faint rush of relief. As the check cleared, she felt an odd combination of feelings: relief, excitement, and an almost overwhelming feeling of obligation. This money wasn't simply for her. It was an opportunity to reinvent her tale, help offer Jordan a better life. After exiting the bank, Mia made her way to a local community college. Several years she had passed past its campus, wondering what it would be like to sit in a classroom. Again to learn, to expand, she walked inside, her hands trembling. As she reached the admittance desk, a nice-faced woman greeted her and inquired how she might help. "I'd want to enlist," Mia stated, her voice steady, despite the tense flutter in her chest. In accounting, the woman smiled brightly. "You're in the correct place. Let's get you started." As Mia filled out the forms, she felt a feeling of purpose she hadn't known in years. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about displaying Jordan that it was never too late to follow your ambitions, no matter how unattainable they might appear. Yet as Mia went out of the admissions office, a fresh concept hit her. What if this was simply the beginning? What if Clint's gesture wasn't merely a gift, merely a spark to kindle a far greater flame? Weeks went into months, and the changes in Mia's life were nothing short of transformational. She balanced her shifts at the diner, taking evening programs at the community college. And while it wasn't easy, there was a renewed resolve in her stride. Jordan noticed too. He'd gladly inform his buddies. "My mom's going to college." Mia couldn't help but smile every time she heard it. But it wasn't simply her own life that Mia sought to transform. Inspired by Clint's gesture, she began setting aside a portion of the money for a small fund to help others in her community. If it was a struggling single parent needs food, or a student unable to afford textbooks, Mia softly stepped in, giving back in ways that Clint's message had urged her to. One evening, while Mia looked through her accounting textbook, at the kitchen table, Jordan tugged at her sleeve. "Mom," he asked, his large brown eyes interested, "do you think that man will ever come back to the eatery?" Mia halted, the thought taking her off surprise. Would Clint Eastwood ever return? She didn't know, but his effect on her life was one she will carry forever. "Maybe," she said quietly, ruffling Jordan's hair, "but even if he doesn't, he's always going to be part of our tale." And that was the truth. Clint's action had reminded Mia of the power of compassion, of recognizing someone for who they are, and raising them up when the world felt heavy. It had rekindled her conviction in herself, amidst the possibilities of life, and in the necessity of paying it forward. As Mia closed her textbook and prepared for bed that night, she felt a sense of tranquility she hadn't known in years. Her trip was far from done. Yet for the first time, she wasn't merely surviving. She was prospering one step at a time. And thus the following time, a stranger joined her portion at the diner. Mia greeted them with the same warmth and grace, understanding that sometimes even the tiniest encounters might change a life forever. Every act of compassion, no matter how little, has the power to cause ripples far beyond anything we can perceive. If this story impacted you, don't forget to subscribe, then share it with someone. Anyone could use a little encouragement today.